Welcome to Talk Show, the show where we read the news so you don't have to, because frankly, we've slipped into an alternate reality where decades happen every single week. It has been a long few days since Thursday, which in news terms these days equals roughly 7 coups, 3 cover-ups, a war tease, and at least one policy that sounds fake but actually is not. And remember, if you feel overwhelmed, that's not anxiety, that's all by design. Let's get into it. In our first story, the Epstein files were released, sort of. You remember label makers, labelers for short? There was this brief, magical, hysterical moment where labelers were a hot gift item back in the 90s. So imagine receiving one of these labelers as a gift, but you never learn how to use it properly. You never learn how to punch the letters into the tape before you then apply to whatever you're labeling. Now imagine that you're then handed a stack of 33,000 documents, a roll of black tape, and they just say, have fun, kid. That's the version of the Epstein files we got. Entire pages are blacked out, names missing, documents mysteriously gone. It's almost like the Justice Department said, listen, we hear your concerns. And in response, we photoshopped Michael Jackson, Bill Clinton, and Diana Ross into the Epstein files as requested. Thank God they're like so comically inept, because otherwise this might be sad or maybe even scary. Either way, bipartisan outrage followed, which is sort of rare and beautiful, like a lunar eclipse or when Congress accidentally does its job. But people are asking, why are files missing? Why are documents heavily redacted? We know why. It's a sort of figurative why. And why does every explanation sound like a hostage note? The official response just seems to be, listen, we released some of the truth. What more do you want? All of it? In a related theme, our second story tonight, we return to the distraction hour. As discussed in previous episodes, whenever uncomfortable information bubbles up to the surface, Trump and the team reach for good old reliable. Look over there. No, over there. No, quick, over there, further with explosions. So first up, Venezuela. We talked about Venezuela a few days ago. The U.S. has seized yet another Venezuelan oil tanker. It's a bold strategy, Cotton, and we'll see if it pays off, especially since America is the one that's going around flipping tables over around the world and then going, who did that? It feels like some sort of bizarro terrorist version of Lord of the Rings, where it's like, we've had one war crime, yes, but surely we can have a second war crime. Venezuela is calling it piracy. Probably accurate. The U.S. is calling it enforcement, most likely bullshit. And then oil markets are like, oh my God, oh good, more chaos. Just what the stock tickers asked for. I'll tell you, nothing quells domestic scandal like an international incident involving fossil fuels and unresolved grudges. Then, to build on that, Syria essentially saw U.S. airstrikes following the deaths of 3 Americans. So that means that, once again, the Middle East is like the background music for American anxiety and stress. And the message seems to be, we can't release the Epstein documents, but we can fire some missiles. To continue along in our third story, let's talk a little bit about healthcare, but we're going to make it worse. So the administration has moved to cut federal support for gender-affirming care for minors. Doctors say this will harm kids. Advocates say this will increase suicide risk. Experts are saying that it will make healthcare outcomes worse. And lawmakers naturally said, look, we heard everyone's concerns, and we take all of these opinions and claims and science very seriously. But we're going to do this anyway. And it's a fairly moronic strategy, turning healthcare into like a culture war while insisting that we're protecting the children in the same week that you refuse to protect children from anything. So anyway, if you missed it, Republicans basically also made a deepfake AI video of a Democrat giving kid trans hormone therapy. Again, comically, undeniably a fake video, but I think there's a lot of misunderstanding and misinformation about gender-affirming care. So, today, in our main story, we're going to do an ELI 5. We're going to clear things up a bit about gender-affirming care. We need to talk about this mainly because, according to the internet, this is either A, doctors performing drive-through surgeries on children, or B, literally just a haircut and a therapist saying, how does that make you feel? And like most moral panics, the truth is deeply inconvenient for those who are outraged. So let's shed some light on this. Step 1, in the least exciting plot twist in medicine, gender-affirming care is not one thing, okay? It's an umbrella term, which means it's going to be boring, all right? Most of it is talking, thinking, waiting, talking again, and then shockingly, more waiting. Yeah, it's not Fast and the Furious medicine. It's like sloth run DMV medicine. Step 2, social stuff. And brace yourself for this. For many people, gender affirming care is using a different name. It's using different pronouns. It's wearing different clothes. And it certainly can be that different haircut that I mentioned before. But that means we've reached the part of the discourse where mind your own business becomes radical ideology. Okay? We're not talking about pills. We're not talking about scalpels. At this moment in time, we're just talking about vibes. Okay? That may be an important part of gender affirming care. Step 3, therapy, huh? The thing everyone claims to want until it actually happens. If someone is struggling, then usually the next step in this is going to be therapy of some kind, and not conversion therapy, not I'm going to convince you of something therapy, just, hey, how are you doing? Not great? Okay, well, let's unpack that slowly and responsibly. This alone disqualifies it from being some sort of conspiracy, because no conspiracy loves paperwork as much as therapy. Step 4, medical care. That's where the record scratch comes in. Here's where the internet tends to lose its mind. Medical gender affirming care is rare, gradual, monitored, optional, okay? Optional. Key note there. People seem to think that you're just voluntold that you're now a new gender. And then last but not least, it typically involves as many as 9 different adults, a dozen different adults, all saying, are we sure? So for teens, this could mean puberty blockers, which, let's be super clear about this, are reversible, temporary, and have been used for decades. Okay? No one is just like buying black market hormone vials that we just found yesterday. This is all sciencey stuff. The function of these puberty blockers literally are to prevent locking in permanent changes while everyone takes a breath. Somehow that became, we're canceling biology with our madness pills. Listen, biology is undefeated. Relax. Let's take a quick second to talk about hormones, which are not a starter Pokemon. Hormone therapy usually happens later, oftentimes in adulthood, okay? Not in someone's teens, 18 or older. And the other piece of this is it involves doctors, doctors, right? Blood work. It involves dosing, side effects monitoring, and consent forms long enough to qualify as CVS receipts. It's not, I woke up trans and now I'm legally a different person by lunch. It's, I've thought about this for years, and now my doctor wants another follow-up. Now let's talk about surgery for a quick second, because this is the thing that like everyone yells about and nobody seems to actually get. So the surgeries are by far and away largely for adults. Okay, there are exceptions, but it's mostly for adults. It's also the least common part of this type of care. It's not just like everyone's getting transgender surgeries, right? That's bullshit. It requires years of evaluations. Surgeries don't just happen overnight. Like I had a hernia repaired last year, and even that took several weeks and multiple visits and all this other stuff. And it was like a routine surgery. It took like an hour for them to like fix this thing and then kick me out of the hospital. So again, these surgeries require years of evaluation. They require multiple doctors, and they require stability over time. If things get unstable, the brakes are pumped. The parking brake is engaged, and we pause and figure out what's happening. If this stuff was being handed out, hospitals would be operating like Spirit Airlines, okay? They're not. Now, here's where you got to prepare for some disappointment, y'all. The actual goal of gender-affirming care, it is not recruiting, please. It's not convincing, and it certainly isn't dismantling civilization, all right? What it is lowering depression, it's lowering anxiety, fewer suicides, and people functioning well enough to just file their dang taxes, okay? That's it. That's what this crazy revolution is, helping people with their mental health. Isn't that wild? So the final reality check here is that this works like every other kind of medicine, y'all. You start small, you don't rush, you reassess constantly, and then you stop if it's not helping. This is why the loudest critics of this describe it as TikTok witches administering stuff in the Duane Reade parking lot. It's not radical, it's clinical. And frankly, if it was a secret plan to reshape society, it wouldn't involve filling out this many forms. So anyways, I hope you've learned at least a little bit about this if you didn't know anything about this before. Let's get serious and just understand that this is a made-up fake issue, and it's all malarkey. It's all a distraction from the Epstein files. Let's move on to some more world news. Taiwan and China are fighting again. No one is surprised. This time we started it. Great. The U.S. announced an $11 billion military aid package for Taiwan. China responded with the diplomatic equivalent of, "We're very calm, but we're also furious, and we're also watching you." This is the geopolitical version of posting a passive-aggressive Instagram story with absolutely no context or caption. Everyone insists that this is about deterrence, which would be true if deterrence meant standing very still while holding larger and larger weapons. Elsewhere in the world, in particular North America, we got our butts kicked by the weather this last week. Huge storm system tore through North America. We saw hurricane-force winds, but not caused by a hurricane. We saw power outages, snow in places that emotionally just can't handle it. Climate scientists warned everybody that this would happen. Politicians responded by asking if the climate scientists have tried being quieter. Okay, so let's recap. Since Thursday, the Epstein files were sort of released in theoretical form. A tanker was seized. Bombs were dropped. Healthcare got way worse. Gender-affirming care, not what you think it is. China, big mad once more. The weather is violent, and transparency is something that we yell about but don't actually do. So if all this feels like too much, remember, you're not supposed to follow every story. You're supposed to argue about one headline while 6 others quietly pass legislation. That's the system working as intended. So that's it for this week. If you learned something, I'm so sorry. If you didn't, congratulations, you're coping correctly. Please join me for another one coming up this week, or just scream into the void in the meantime. But I'll see you next time on Talk Show, where the news keeps happening and I keep asking, but why?